Hi, please introduce yourselves and tell us who you are.
Hi, my name is Angel Adam Kobelo. I am a social scientist and researcher.
Well, hello, my name is Rosie Rasa. I'm basically a law student. Yeah, that's all.
Do you have any idea of what gender-based violence is, and have you done anything around that area?
Yes, I have done research on gender-based violence in Manyara, and according to me, or how I would define gender-based violence, is any kind, any form of harm done to someone or a group of people based on perceptions of their gender.
Oh, yeah, me too. I also done a research, but specifically on the laws of Tanzania and how they affect or perpetuate or contribute to further perpetuation of gender-based violence. And to my understanding, gender-based violence would mean any kind of harm or violence that is directed toward a person based on their gender-assigned roles.
So what are the different types of gender-based violence that you know?
That would mean like types of violences.
Yes.
Okay, so personally, I came across types like psychological violence, economic violence, and we have sexual violences and physical violence.
I think they're pretty much the same. That's within the same lane is my understanding of the different types or forms of gender-based violence.
What could you say are the factors that stir up gender-based violence in our communities in Tanzania?
Well, we have customs and traditions. That's like the most basic thing that causes gender-based violence. And then we also, due to the customs and traditions, these aspects, it personally, through my research, I got a better understanding on the laws and how the customs and traditions affect the laws. So in that case then, we have laws that one could say are very patriarchal in one way or the other. Now due to that, it leads to further perpetuation of these gender-based violence acts.
Adding into that, yes, I agree. For the most part, it's the cultures, the traditions that are mostly male dominant and the female is more submissive, and that leads to most forms of gender-based violence. Though other makes gender-based violence more prevalent in our societies are issues like education. But for me, the biggest of them all is poverty. From poverty, there comes a lot of violences of all forms, and in this case, mostly gender-based violence.
So how are you committed to saying no to gender-based violence, and what initiatives or approaches are you using to address that?
Well, I would say it's not me as a person, it's like both of us. Due to the researches that we conducted separately, we got some kind of an understanding of how much this is a problem. You know, when you really get into it, you get to understand how many people are affected by this and how much it really affects our society. So based on that, we decided to start a project that is meant to educate more women out there, more girls out there, and also men. Because if you educate just the women and the girls, and the system is supposed to be male dominant, they really can't get through whatever it is that they learned and understood. So also the male, they need to understand that how this is supposed to work in order to minimize the effect that is already very much rampant. So it's basically a project that we're working on.
Yeah, I think we are saying no to gender-based violence, and as Rose mentioned, there are very saddening, very disturbing instances and incidences and realities for most women and some men that we met across our researches, and then we decided that we are going to do something, either a project or an organization, through an organization that would have a holistic approach to gender-based violence and into helping solve or helping reduce and finally eliminate gender-based violence.
Just that you both conducted. To what extent does gender-based violence affect youth in Tanzania?
It does affect the youth very much. Actually, it affects the youth even at a personal level, because when you say gender-based violence, it's not some kind of a separate entity. It's something that is very close to us, so we experience it on day-to-day basis. It starts from our families. So if I grow up in a place where male dominance is much more advocated, I will grow up in a place which says that women can't do this, and I, being a woman, or supposedly to become a woman in the future, I would have an understanding that there are some things that I can't do just because I'm a woman, or just because I'm a girl, or just because I'm a woman. So I think based on such ideologies, this is how gender-based violence can be said to affect the youth in our country.
In addition to what Rose said, gender-based violence among youth, yes, is very prevalent. And yes, it is more prevalent among young women than it is among young men. But I also want to point out that young men are also affected by violence, especially the form of gender-based violence regarded as psychological. And this is mostly about our cultures and traditions regarding the issue of masculinity and what masculinity means, and what a person who is masculine and as a young man is supposed to do and is supposed not to do. So in these terms, it leads to most men who are abused and violated not be able to report or say anything, because they feel like if they do that, they'll be shamed, they'll be stigmatized, they'll be considered not man enough. Maybe if you could add regarding that, I think you could put it in a very good way.
Basically, it's the misconception around the idea of what masculinity really stands for. So we have a very twisted way of what masculinity really stands for. So if a man or if a young man is to suffer any form of violence that is mainly directed towards them based on them being a man, they would never be able to really speak it out or really say anything about it, because if I do this or if I say this, does that really mean that I'm man enough? Like it would diminish the idea of the fact that I'm man enough to hold it in, because again, the masculinity or the idea of masculinity in our society is being man enough is taking in the pain, never being able to express yourself. That is what masculinity is regarded in our society, which means then it exposes a lot of young men towards a lot of psychological violence. So because they can never be able to speak out anything at all, or any kind of violence that is directed towards them.
Yeah.
Yes.
So from the researches that all of you did, what are the evident consequences that you observed in the community that are caused by gender-based violence?
A lot of consequences in various aspects. Like, you'd have to classify them. We have psychological and actual physical health deficiencies that is happening towards the victims of gender-based violence. We have at a psychological level, at an economical level. It's a very huge thing out there, so it's affecting a lot of people in various ways. Let me speak about the healthy part. We have early marriages, which also open up this door of gender-based violence at a very wider range. So with early marriages, we have early pregnancies, and this exposes young girls to a lot of healthy complications. Like, they are exposed to complications during giving birth. They're exposed to diseases like fistula and several other kinds of complications. And then we have also other women. They could be older or younger girls, in gender-based violence with domestic violence. This affects their health, it affects their psychological health, their physical health. It really distorts them completely, really. Because if someone decided to reduce my dignity into beating me up, into stopping me from speaking up, into really controlling my economical, financial life, and just all because I'm a woman, that should affect my self-esteem too. So that affects at a psychological level. When you speak of health, it's both physical and the mental health part. They are affected. Those are the consequences. And then some other consequences we also have at a social level, I think. At a social level, we would say on the confidence on taking up various opportunities and various platforms in doing various things. Now, because of whatever it is that is already understood out here, some men, depending on the violences that they have been exposed to or experienced, it diminishes their chances in being able, feeling confident enough in pursuing whatever it is that they believe they can do. I think.
Yeah, and gender-based violence basically has a ripple effect throughout that person's life and the people around that person. So for instance, if a person is violated, for instance, I met a case where a woman was violated and she lost her limb. And another one was blind, and another one was raped so badly she just craves with fear all the time. She got depression and anxiety. So these kind of things, these kind of people are affected by the violence. They cannot really go out there and be like, hey, I'm living my life, this happened. Because if I lost a limb, then I have to figure out my whole life. I have to rearrange my life. I have to learn to use a different limb. But generally, the consequences of gender-based violence have a ripple effect, even in our economy and throughout.
Do you think that technology, social media, and other platforms has a role in addressing gender-based violence? If yes, how useful do you think they can be in tackling and addressing gender-based violence cases?
Actually, yeah. Social media can be used as a means as a means to get through to a lot of people, because we know with the platforms available in the name of social media, at some point, maybe not everyone within the population of Tanzania has access to smartphones and the social medias in general, but then we know that the most part of the population do have access to these things. So if we were to use social media as a platform to educate people to try and stop the effects of gender-based violence in its entirety, then it would make a significant impact, because it will get through to a lot of people.
Yeah, but also I think social media could be used into creating more awareness, and also creating campaigns and arts that would make people more aware of the consequences of gender-based violence, but it will also make them ambassadors of stopping or reducing gender-based violence as a whole. And one great thing I think that could be very useful through social media is if some very evident issues of gender-based violence that are posted on social media could be used legally. I do not know if this is already something that is happening, but if, for instance, I just saw a video of a woman who was being hit by a machete by her husband. Mm-hmm. And it's a video, you see it, the person is known, the woman is known, the husband is known, it's very evident. If things like this can be used, if this content can be used to argue a case in court, for instance, I think that could also be very, very useful, because nowadays it's very easy for evidence to show up and to come up. It doesn't have to be as dehumiliating as before, where you are searched in open court or something like that. So I think, yes, social media can be very useful.
Please to have space. So I believe in addressing any social challenges, partnerships of the government, key actors and other stakeholders it's very important. So how do you think these institutions could partner in order to address gender-based violence issues?
Well, for one, these various institutions, including the governments, I think they have been making some kind of movement already over the course of time. They have been trying to educate people from various places, even in the rural areas. They've tried to educate people. Some have established shelter homes. Shelter homes, these are places where the victims can run to and seek refuge in areas like this to get away from the violence and all that. So we even have some women associations. Yes, some women associations that deal with these things. So there is a movement out there that is already happening, and we have various stakeholders that take part in this movement. The problem is that despite the presence of this movement already out there, it's just really still don't understand what gender violence is, or what it stands for, or how much it can affect or is affecting the society at large. So there's a need for more.
I would say the biggest thing that stakeholders and different actors could do regarding gender-based violence and reducing it, or finally eliminating it in Tanzania, would be to try and educate people regarding the culture and traditions that perpetuates gender-based violence to begin with. The patriarchy that is going on, where it's okay to beat your woman if she's too noisy or she speaks too much, or the kind of ideal and mentalities that go on that, violence of some kind is normal and acceptable and even expected, especially in marriages or within families. I think starting from that grassroots level would be a great thing, and it would be transformative in such a great way.
Yeah. So we have spoke of key stakeholders and actors, but what is your call of action to community members and normal citizens? How responsible should they be in supporting and being active and ensure that we end gender-based violence in our country?
I think what is expected to be done is that when we think of what is to be done in order to solve this problem, we think of big things, institutions, organization, gathering around, telling people this and that. But what really should happen in order to really solve this problem is something at a very foundational level, if I may, at a family level. Like, this is the most foundational institution. If we needed an organization to be able to steer up some kind of a movement that would really have an impact, it should be at a family level. Because at a family level is where most of this gender-based violence are condoned, right? Whether it's domestic violence, whether it's rape that happens within houses and homes, and it does, or any form of gender-based violence, it should be at a family home. That people should be told to never be able to condone any of these acts, because we have various cases where, let's say, you could speak of the helpers or the house girls, what we commonly know as house girls. These girls get raped, they get violated in various ways, but then because it's a member of a family that did this to a girl, most of these cases never go far or never get anywhere really. Or it's a husband that has bet the wife, right? That's domestic violence. And now you have the elders of the family talking to this woman, talking her out, or sometimes even intimidating them not to push forward the matter or to seek any kind of solace over the matter. Why? Because that is how marriage life is expected to be, and you're supposed to tolerate these things. So this is how families condone these acts, which means they leave the perpetrator to believe that they can get away with such acts. And if they can get away with this one, they'll keep on doing it to another person and another person, or they'll teach somebody else to act and do that thing in the same manner. So if we have family members or people at the family level educated and meant to understand how they can stop this thing at a very primary level, then we can solve this problem entirely.
I do agree with Rose, and I think especially the men within the families, and even the older people in which in their generation, you cannot say this, you cannot report this is your family, you have to tolerate everything. But my call to action would be that do not tolerate gender-based violence, any form of gender-based violence. Report these incidences. The government is trying. It has gender desks right now in police stations. It has social welfare offices. It has community development offices that are there to help people with this kind of issues. And it's not necessarily your immediate family or your immediate friend that you can go seek help for. You could stop or condemn any act of gender-based violence, even around you, even within your community. But really, I think people should be more aware of gender-based violence and should stop it in all its forms, because it has grave effects to everyone, including you.
Thank you very much, Rose and Angela. Do you have anything more to add or anything else to say?
Well, I believe we have plenty, but in a nutshell, it should be understood that this is something that affects all people, like from different walks of life. The rich, the poor, they're all affected by gender-based violence, because when we speak gender-based violence, in most cases, it is understood that it is the have-nots or the people that are not rich enough, the poor, and all that. That is what is believed to be where gender-based violence is expected to rise or exists generally. But in real sense, regardless of the fact that in real sense, yes, in a place where poverty is very rampant, gender-based violence is very high, but it doesn't excuse the fact that even in areas where people are economically or financially well off, gender-based violence is still existent. So in that sense then, anyone can be a potential victim of gender-based violence, and anyone can be a perpetrator of gender-based violence, which means it leaves everyone exposed. So in that case then, people should really understand what is gender-based violence, what it stands for, and how it can really affect someone. And more so, they should also understand that there are various institutions, there are laws that are in place that are meant and enacted or put in place to protect them. So with knowing this, we can mitigate the situation when it comes to gender-based violence.
Yes. I think most of what I would say is already said, but what I could add to that is that gender-based violence has a ripple effect, as I said once before. Is that even though it doesn't happen directly to you, it still affects you somehow, because there's a woman or a man somewhere who is incapable of doing their job as well as they should, and that contributes less to the economy, and that goes round and round and round till it gets to you, who is not directly affected by gender-based violence. But I would generally say that gender-based violence is something that everyone should know about. People should be more aware of it. Educate yourself on what gender-based violence is, who are there to help you, seek out people, and just help end gender-based violence in Tanzania. Thank you.
So what is your understanding on the position of the laws and policies in Tanzania regarding gender-based violence?
Well, when it comes to laws and policies on gender-based violence in Tanzania, we can't ignore the fact that there are laws, that we don't have a specific law on gender-based violence in Tanzania, but there are some laws that have tackled issues that bear the face of gender-based violence. Now the problem comes that these laws, when they tackle these tiny issues, they either do not provide fully on various acts of gender-based violence, or they just ignore some of the most necessary issues when it comes to gender-based violence. I can give examples. We have the law of marriage, right? The act provides or restricts the husband from imposing corporal punishment towards the wife. But the problem comes as to what really constitutes as corporal punishment. Because if an act provides for something by stating that this act is against the law, they should define the act in order to be able to fit such acts into a certain pigeonhole. Because does a slap, when they say corporal punishment, does a slap constitute as corporal punishment? When your husband twists your arm in a certain way, does that constitute as corporal punishment? So they have to be clear. Also, we have the penal code that states there's no mention of domestic violences, and this is something that is very common in most houses or in most families in Tanzania, right? So there's no mention of domestic violence entirely in any law in Tanzania. Which then means if these incidents are ever reported to police, they would reduce domestic violence into either common assault or some kind of an assault that is provided for within the penal code. So with this, then there will be some incidences that will be let go of because of that, because of the fact that these acts are not specifically defined. What really constitutes as corporal punishment? What really constitutes as domestic violence? So if it were to be done in a way that the laws should be enacted in a way that they really, really explain these acts of domestic violence, then that will be a better way on the legal part of this to be able to really stop or really control gender-based violence and eliminate it in the long run. So, yeah.
Yeah, there are laws and acts by the government that deal with gender-based violence. However, as Rose mentioned, there are gaps within those laws, and Human Development Trust did a research and found 112 gaps in the laws regarding gender-based violence. And these gaps, these unclearly defined laws, lead to dismissed cases, mistrust of victims of gender-based violence to the criminal justice system, but it also leads to perpetuation of gender-based violence as a whole. I'll give an example. So for instance, in the Sexual Offense Act, the Act does not provide for marital rape cases or marital rape incidences, and such a thing perpetuates or kind of limits or any form of legal support that victims can get regarding marital rape. And from research, most married people, especially women, are raped by their husbands. And most of the cases, they're tried, but most cases do not get to trial, and the tried cases do not reach sentencing because the actual wording of marital rape is not included in the Sexual Offense Act. So such things perpetuates these forms of gender-based violence in Tanzania, and I think it should be looked at.
Vijana Think Tank, Fikra za Vijana.